Hi, this is David Thornburg, President and CEO of the Committee of 70, and welcome to another special edition of Studio C70. And we're delighted to be able to snag a few minutes with City Commissioner Al Schmidt, who is the man of the hour. Commissioner, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me back.
Well, I was thinking about the last time we talked, it was warm out. And in between that time and now, you've been on 60 Minutes, so you've gone big time.
Well, that was just a warm up for this thing.
Oh, there you go. I was going to say, just don't. You got your start on Studio C70. I just want you to remember.
Yeah.
So you are in the convention center, which is the new kind of mission control for the election operations in Philadelphia. But just give us a sense of, what's going on there, what today was all about. What's the job that you're trying to tackle?
Yeah, we've had most of our operations consolidated here in the run up to election day, whether it's preparing election materials to go out to the polling places or all of the mail-in ballots and absentee ballots being returned, sorted, and prepared so that we can begin opening them on election morning and counting them as quickly and accurately as humanly possible. It's busy here day and night. It feels a little bit like being in a casino. There's no windows. It's busy day and night. You can't tell what time of day it is or anything that's going on outside of this building. And the security is terrific here. Yeah.
Well, and I think I saw the last numbers you announced today on the volume of mail ballots was about 450,000 requests for ballots, and maybe
That's right.
And maybe what are we up to, about 65% that have come back now?
Yeah, it's 287,000 back, or about that. Yeah. And we get them back, during the day and throughout the day. We have 17, as you know, 17 satellite Board of Elections offices around the city where voters are dropping off their ballots in person. We have drop boxes around the city. And those come back, at the end of the day as well, and are, brought back by law enforcement and kept under pretty secure conditions here.
Great.
So the number will go up by the end of the day, and then the mail tomorrow, and then more tomorrow evening. So, it continues to increase, and we're certainly closing in quickly on 300,000.
Yeah. Little did you know when you signed up for this job that you would oversee a mail house.
And the other thing is, when I first ran for the office, I had someone who's very important, far more important than me, say, why would you want to do that job? It's so boring. You're going to have so much free time on your hands, and it's the same thing every election. And they couldn't have been more wrong. My team works around the clock, 7 days a week, and has been for many months. Our whole operation, not just our department of 125 or so full-time employees, but we've pulled hundreds of employees in from the rest of the city government to help out with this effort, hired temporary full-time employees to assist with organizing materials and things like that. And there has not been a dull moment, unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's stay on that for a second, because I know we've talked about this before. There's a lot of seeds of suspicion that have been sown around this whole mail ballot operation. And I always like to remind folks about who actually does this work. And that if you have concerns or questions or anxieties, you ought to turn to folks like you and your team to settle those anxieties. So just take a second and let folks know some of the particular individuals that are working 24/7 or nearly right now, who are making this whole thing work.
Yeah, we have a cadre of very dedicated election administrators. They've been supervising and running our satellite election offices and are busy here day and night as well. They're very dedicated people. In their private lives, they are Democrats and they are Republicans, and people registered neither Democrat nor Republican. But they only care about counting the votes and counting them accurately And if I had any concern about any one of them, they wouldn't be working here. That's for sure.
Yeah. Anybody?
And my team, which I know everybody thinks this, I'm sure you do at 70, and I know every office in City Hall does. Like, I have such an incredible team working in my office. Seth Bluestein, who's my chief deputy commissioner, Michelle Montavo, who does all of my digital media and is deputy commissioner, and Azaz Gill, who does a lot of my outreach work. It's just an incredible team. And we're down to the three of them and us in my office. And there's a lot of work to do. And they are working just literally day and night. That's not a figure of speech or something like that. Seth left here at 1:30 a.m. last night and was here first thing this morning. I left before Seth at like 10 and was back at 7 o'clock this morning. So it's really been around the clock. We're running a marathon right now to election day. And then on election day, we start a sprint.
Yeah.
So that's what we have ahead of us once we hit election day as well.
Yeah.
We have a while to go.
Yeah. Well, just one other note on that. I've known Seth for a while, in particular, and think very highly of him. And I know he's also balancing some challenges on the home front with, maybe he has a 6-month-old or thereabouts. I remember being on a Zoom call with him where his little one was competing for attention.
Yes.
Because it was time to eat or something. So.
Well, you taught Seth well at Penn, by the way. I'm sure you're proud.
Yeah, no, I am. And I certainly wish him and the rest of your team well. So what, it's funny. I've heard a lot of folks say this election is not about election day, where it all begins and ends. Election day will be the end of the election, right? And then we'll head into election week, which is when that place behind you is going to be a real beehive of activity. But what's the job between now and then? Just give folks some sense of what your punch list is, critical things that you have to execute between now and then.
So we're essentially running 2 elections at the same time, one by mail-in voting and one in person. So the mail-in voting component of it, even though not a vote will be counted until election day, there's a lot of work that goes along with that. We had hit the deadline yesterday for applying for a mail-in ballot, and we have all the other processes that we mentioned before going on here in terms of organizing the ballots for counting. But a lot of our focus as we close in on election day, really pivots toward, we're getting out all the voting machines, preparing all the polling places, getting all the election materials for 1,703 divisions across the city for those election board judges of elections to pick up this weekend. And a lot of our attention has been, and right now is very much on that. Yeah.
Well, as you said, running 2 operations at the same time will tax anyone. But you mentioned deadlines.
So just one thing about that, and one important dynamic or nexus between those 2 things is, while they're 2 separate elections, there's a lot of interplay between them. So if we close in on certainly more than 300,000 voters who will have voted by mail, that's 300,000 fewer voters in line on election day. It's good for those mail-in voters because they already cast their vote, and it's good for everyone else who's voting in person because those other people won't be in line on election day because they already voted. Turnout in presidential general election, as you know, is very high. We always have lines day and night, and mail-in voting, a sort of dividend to that will be fewer people in line. In the primary, about half of our voters voted by mail and about half in person. So it'll be interesting to see if that kind of happens again in the general election.
Yeah. I think I saw the numbers that maybe the number of people in Philadelphia who have requested mail ballots is about 40% of the registration. So that might suggest that maybe there are more folks going to show up at the polls than we might have anticipated.
Yeah, and one thing we don't know, because mail-in voting is so new to Pennsylvania, is does mail-in voting grow the pie, right? Does it help bring in more voters who couldn't vote during that 13-hour window on election day. And hopefully that's the case. In addition, I'm sure a lot of those voters are also voters who would have otherwise voted on election day, who would have stood in line for, to vote along with everybody else. So it's good that that they've cast their vote, and on election day, people who haven't cast their vote by mail will be able to vote in person.
Yeah. Well, another in the list of firsts for this election is the existence of the satellite election offices, which you and your colleagues opened, as well as the drop boxes. And I'm sure you've been around to some of those satellite offices.
All of them,
yeah. And we were saying on the staff that it appears that there's a great community spirit at a lot of those satellite offices. But any particular vignettes that you observed when you were out there?
No, one thing that has surprised me is we have long lines, which is a pleasant surprise, or at least we did, especially in the days leading up to the deadline to apply for a mail-in ballot, but had received relatively few complaints from voters. And that might be because those voters, for the most part, are choosing to vote that day. They could come back a different day if they wanted to. They could vote on election day, as they always have. The response from voters has been very positive. And those satellite locations are really being used. That's a very encouraging thing, both in terms of voter participation and that we're making available options for voters, that they would prefer. They're preferring to cast a mail-in ballot in advance of election day at a time that they're choosing.
Yeah.
Or completing it, from home and applying and having the ballot sent at home.
Sure. And I know we've seen reports of, folks leading, sort of a little dance segment at some of those satellite offices. There's been people serving food. There feels like there's a lot of the same kind of community spirit that we are used to seeing at on the election day. So maybe you've multiplied by 17. Maybe there's an X factor at work there that we've kind of unleashed. So I know you've got lots of stuff to take care of, but let's go to the sort of advice segment of this conversation. We have heard often, and I'm sure you have, from voters who received a mail ballot, but they're not sure that they want to cast it. Maybe they're thinking they should cast, go on election day and vote on the machines. What's your advice to people in that situation?
So ultimately, we want voters to vote, and we want them to vote in whatever manner they are most comfortable voting, as long as they are eligible voters and cast their vote, period. That being said, if you've requested a mail-in ballot and you still have that mail-in ballot, would really encourage you to complete that mail-in ballot. And we have drop boxes throughout the city. All the satellite locations, all 17 of them, can also accept ballots dropped off there. So we'd really encourage you to do that. And one reason is that the election code allows for people who requested a mail-in ballot, but either weren't able to send it back before election day or drop it off, or choose not to. There's a process by which they can show up at the polls and cast their vote. They have to either bring their ballot with them, sign an affidavit, election board signs an affidavit, then they sign the full book, then they can vote on the machine. Or if they don't bring it with them, they would complete a provisional ballot, which is essentially a mail-in ballot, not mailed, fill it out at the polling place, which means, one, you're adding to the line. Two, the process for the election board is more complicated. There's more going on. And three, you're inside of that polling place for longer when we really want people sort of moving through. I'm not trying to tell anybody how to vote. That being said, I'm just asking that they be mindful that if they choose that route, they're sort of going to be facing this, as will everyone else in line as well.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to advise, as you were asking, if you don't mind, is election day is still days away here. But I'd really encourage people who have mail-in ballots and want to return them to consider these drop boxes and satellite locations across the city. At our website, philadelphiavotes.com, they're listed there. 70 has really been helpful in getting out the word on that. The Inquirer, Billy Penn, all sorts of news stories have prepared maps and other visuals and sort of aids to help you cast your vote.
Yeah. Well, I'm in agreement with you. And we're not telling people how to vote, but just understand the consequences. And I would suggest that doing what you advised is both good for you and it's good for us. It's being considerate to other people who have to vote at the polls, but it's also makes sense for you. So another question that we get asked a lot, and this is a question about the deadline for mail ballots to be received by your folks. Because there's some noise around that. Do you just want to explain what the noise is, and again, what your observation or recommendation is?
Sure. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled last month that county boards of elections can receive mail-in ballots and count mail-in ballots up until Friday after Election Day. So 3 days after Election Day, provided they're mailed on or before Election Day. We can receive, if they're received Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and they're mailed on or before Election Day, we count them. It's currently being litigated. It was litigated the last couple of weeks, and a court upheld that decision to keep it until Friday, but it's back in the courts again. So we'll see kind of, hopefully, if there's going to be a decision one way or another, that the courts understand how time sensitive the situation is and how important it is that we communicate to voters accurate information, because we don't want someone holding on onto a ballot thinking they can still get it back on Friday if that ends up changing. And I have no reason to think it's going to change, but when things are in court, judges make those decisions.
Yeah. So last bit of advice, which is maybe the trickiest one, is, as you noted in your Twitter feed this week, and you have before, there's a swirling clouds of disinformation and misinformation about the security of the vote by mail process. So what's your, what do you say to voters that you hope gives them a sense of security about this new process?
I would encourage them to tune out a lot of that noise. I would encourage them to do, as you mentioned at the beginning of our segment here, to listen to voices that they trust, especially voices that don't have a dog in the fight, who are good faith actors, and not listen to bad faith actors who are seeking one way or another, for one reason or another, to manipulate people into distrusting the election results based on no evidence whatsoever.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, a sneak preview, we're going to be putting a full page ad in the Inquirer and in the Philadelphia Tribune and online on Aldea in the next few days, just making sure that folks know that from the Committee of 70 standpoint, this is a process that we should all trust, and that there's good reason to trust it. It's not just smoke and mirrors. As you know, we have been longtime watchers of the process. So I like to think we have a little context, but this is a really important election, and it's going to be, and I think you'd agree, maybe record-setting turnout. And I know you folks are working hard to deliver the goods. So thanks, Al. Anything else you want to throw into the mix?
No, one last little thing is at the satellite centers that I mentioned before, where you can drop off your mail-in ballot if you have received it. If you've applied for a mail-in ballot and have not received it, you can go to one of those 7 satellite locations and request a replacement ballot. You've already applied and were approved in advance of Election Day. If we mailed you a ballot and you didn't receive it, you can request a replacement ballot. And even if the other ballot arrived, and even if a malicious actor sent in 2 ballots, only 1 ballot from a voter is going to count, period. You can receive a replacement ballot at any of those locations if you haven't received it yet. up into and including election day.
Yeah.
If that hasn't happened, just please don't wait until election day, because we expect we'll see lines at those locations on election day as well.
Yeah. No, those satellite offices are a great sort of a safety valve or a a plan B for folks to resolve their issues. So credit to you all for standing them up. Well, I'll let you go. As I said, I know you got plenty to do and plenty to do in this next week, but I appreciate your joining us for a couple minutes, and I'm sure we'll see you again this week.
No, I appreciate all the work the Committee of 70 is doing and the other constellation of city agencies that have really pitched in to help us out to make this election possible.
Great. Talk soon now.